Say it again. Our call to worship words this morning are by our own Reverend Sherry Woodbury.
Out of the din of the city,
away from the noise of the crowds,
we come to rest in this moment,
in this place,
set apart from the never-ending to-do list,
embracing the seventh day, a day of rest.
We come to the warmth and stillness
of this sacred hour.
Remember, you have chosen to be here. Something in your life led you to arrive here, now.
Whatever tasks and cares await you, now, for this brief time, simply rest.
Allow your soul to be nurtured. Let the waves in your mind and heart gradually subside.
As you come home to yourself, holy and whole,
come, let us worship together. Welcome, one and all. I'm so glad you have chosen to join us for worship at First Unitarian Church of Omaha today. My name is the Reverend Sherry Woodbury, and I'm the settled minister here. A special welcome to visitors, whether you are joining us online or in person for the first time or have been coming for a while now. This congregation is a community of all ages and abilities. It is a community with a rainbow of gender and sexual identities. It is a community of diverse cultural and class backgrounds. We draw from many sources of inspiration and share common liberal religious values. Whoever you may be, we welcome you to bring your whole, Yoda. Your whole self, even the part that makes mistakes, into worship with us. I guess this is technically Baby Yoda. He's hiding my teeth. Okay. Each week we acknowledge that where we meet for worship as the First Unitarian Church of Omaha is the land of the Omaha Oto Nations, and that Indigenous people in the greater community have become marginalized and made invisible. May we recognize their presence among us and work with them to resolve issues such as poverty, displaced children, and murdered and missing Indigenous women, the MMIW. At this time, let's see, I don't see any little ones in the sanctuary. Oh, we've got one little one. Who would like to come forward? Who, young at heart, might like to come forward with any children and any teachers and light the chalice this morning? As you may know, we are in stewardship season. Ben Stallings shares a reflection today on financial support for our mission.
Good morning. Some of you know that I was raised UU, and I grew up going to two different congregations. I lived in a small town where our local church had fallen on hard times, and they'd had to sell their church building, and they were meeting in the YWCA, didn't have any kind of Sunday school or youth group. And so for those things, I went to All Souls Church in Tulsa, which is one of the very largest congregations in the entire UUA. And then after college, I joined First Universalist Church of Minneapolis, which again is one of the largest churches in the denomination. In a big congregation like that, it's easy to get kind of complacent about where the money is coming from because nobody really needs to know who are the big donors and who are the small donors and who's giving how much. But meanwhile, my parents' congregation in my hometown had bought another church building, and for a while things were going well, and then things not going quite as well, and they became very dependent on a few families to support the church. And watching that dynamic, I see that not only is it not very sustainable, and they may be back in that situation again of having to sell the building, but we have one of our core principles is to uphold democracy in our decision-making process. And it can be difficult to weigh everybody's voices equally when everyone in the congregation knows that this family is giving 1,000 times more than this other family. And so, there goes the tea. Grogu is adventurous today. So the stewardship committee didn't talk to me about what I should say this morning. So I'm ad-libbing a little bit here, but fortunately our congregation is not in that situation right now of being dependent on a few wealthy families. But we know from our history that it has been the case in the past. And to me, part of why I feel that pledging is important is because it's a reflection of our values that we all need to do our part, and we all need to play a role in maintaining this community. And I know that not everyone is in the position to give more this year, but if you are, I hope you'll consider doing that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. And now we have a time for all ages, which Douglas Lee Regier will share. Again, I'm going to invite forward anyone young or young at heart who would like to come up front for the story. And if you'd just like to take it in from where you are, that's fine as well.
Now, I'm from a day when we didn't even have microphones in church, so all that is a little new to me. I did home child care for 13 years, so I'm used to having kids around my feet. And one of the stories I like to read them was Goodnight Moon, even though it wasn't nighttime. And so I'll say you can think back on this story, Goodnight Moon, tonight when you have a chance to take a rest. Or maybe you get a Sunday afternoon nap. I love those. Okay. All right. Goodnight Moon by Margaret Wise Brown. Pictures by Clement Hurd. I'm going to do this just like we do in daycare. In the great green room, there was a telephone and a red balloon and a picture of, can you find the red balloon? Yes. The cow jumping over the moon. And there were 3 little bears sitting on stairs. I guess you've got the pictures in front of me. And 2 little kittens and a pair of mittens. And a little toy house and a young mouse. And a comb and a brush and a bowl full of mush, maybe porridge. And a quiet old lady, I would like to say a senior woman, who was whispering, hush. I'd like to think of her as a grandmother. Good night, room. All the things in the room. Good night, moon. Good night, cow jumping over the moon. Good night, light and the red balloon. Good night, bears. Good night, chairs. Good night, kittens. And good night, mittens. Good night, clocks. And good night, socks. Good night, little house, and good night, mouse. Good night, comb, and good night, brush. Good night, nobody. Good night, mush. And good night to the old lady, whispering, hush. Good night, stars. Good night, air. Good night, noises everywhere. And that's the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Douglas. Now, you might be feeling a little sleepy if you have that built in like I am now. Let's wake up a little bit with a hymn. We're going to sing number 311 in the great hymnal, Let It Be a Dance.
Yes. So we've been waiting for this.
You can stand or sit, whatever's comfortable for you.
Let me dance with you. May I dance with you. Through the times and the times with you. Let me dance. Let the song be heard. Let music say a word. And the sound say a word. Let me dance, let me dance, let me dance. Let us learn to sing. Hear a melody. To the lost at sea. Let me dance. Let me dance with you. May I dance with you. Through the time and too. Let me dance. Everybody turn to stand. Let your body learn to bend. Hallelujah. Let me dance, let me dance, let me dance. A child's moment, old must die. A time for joy, a time to cry. Take us passers by. Let me dance with you. May I dance with you. Through the times and let me dance. Morning sun comes out at night. Without there is no light. If it's not it's mine. Let me dance, let me dance, let me dance. Let the sunshine, let it rain. Shine, rain. And let it go again. Let me dance.
It's wonderful to be singing hymns together again. You all look lovely. We come to a time for sharing joys and concerns. I haven't had any items submitted in advance, so I'll give a moment to see what appears here in the chat. Anyone can also submit one online. We have a form on our website prior to the service, and those who are present in the sanctuary can write on a little form that is at either door as you enter the sanctuary. Let's see what we have. Concern from Nellie Chenoweth. She shares, we are preparing to send my ancient Kelpie, Charlie, over the Rainbow Bridge later this week. He's 18 years old and having some difficulty with his arthritis that is no longer manageable. So sorry to hear about your pet, your four-legged family member, Nellie. James Major shares a joy. My beautiful mom, Harriet, celebrated her 99th birthday today. Harriet Major has touched so many lives. With arms around, she is loved. And I believe Harriet is on the stream today, so let's all give a wave. Happy birthday, Harriet, 99, woohoo. Okay. It looks like all of our joys and concerns today. I think many of us are sharing the joy of spring and things pushing up out of the ground and garden beds and beginning to bud on trees, which is just wonderful. So with all of the joys and concerns shared among us, both those shared and those that may just be held silently in the heart, let us share a centering song with one another. You can sing along with this if you like. It's in the Teal hymnal, number 1002, Comfort Me. One of the first songs in there. We're just going to sing 2 verses of this. And of course, if you prefer to just close your eyes and listen, that's okay too. We'll sing Comfort Me, and then for the second verse, Rest with Me. On the wings of this music, let us continue in a mood of meditation or prayer. Each week we observe a period of silence so that we can open our hearts in compassion to all those who know suffering in our community and beyond. After I lift up a pastoral meditation, we will observe a minute of silence for your own inward reflection. You might want to check your posture, get comfortable, and relax your body. Words of Chris Cervantes. Rest now. Rest in the peace of this moment. Be at ease. In your mind's eye, look up at the stars and down at the grass. Imagine the stars looking back at you over years and centuries, across oceans of empty space. Imagine the feel of the grass on your bare feet and feel it dry and crunchy, or soft and supple. Rest now. Rest in the peace of this moment. Dream for a little while of young people and young animals, innocent in the way of the young, careless and uncaring, accepting everything in their newness. Dream for a little while of the elders and the wisdom they have to give, the voices that say to you, it is right and proper to rest now. Rest in the peace of this moment. Be still at the turning axis of the world and let go of the long unspooling of history, of sorrow and joy and birth and death and all the long years between. Rest now. Rest in the peace of this moment. A time of silence. Every week, we take up an offering in support of our liberal religious values. Half the loose currency in the offering plate is donated to a cause with a local presence, which advances important principles of Unitarian Universalism. Today, we wrap up our March collection for the Women's Center for Advancement. The WCA assists anyone in the Omaha area who is experiencing domestic violence, sexual assault, stalking, or human trafficking. For those in the sanctuary, ushers will pass the offering basket so you can remain seated, and those online will find a donation link in the chat. I invite you to give in a spirit of abundance as you are able during a gift of music from the early morning risers. Rest is holy. Rest is a religious imperative. Rest is a radical act of self-love and social transformation. I think most of us understand rationally that human beings need rest, yet overwork is the norm in this country. It's not just an economic necessity for many, it's also a deep cultural value. Americans are taught to measure our worth by how hard we work and how productive we are. I have a vivid memory of expressing this viscerally myself. It was about 15 years ago. The setting was a visit to a Reiki energy healer. I voiced a common feeling when, on the Reiki table, my energy is unlocking and my feelings unblocking, I spontaneously cried out, "It's never enough." It's never enough. In that moment in my life, that's how I felt about the work I was doing in philanthropy. That no matter how much I accomplished, the hard-driving business leaders and professionals that surrounded me as board members and donors, people who measured their lives in billable hours and awards, would always want yet more from me. And perhaps I would want more from myself. I felt tired and trapped. I couldn't see a way out of this dilemma that I felt deep in my being. Today, many would name this internalized capitalism. A meme that has been circulating online provides a 6-point list of how internalized capitalism shows up. The version of the list I saw was from Therapy with Lee. Keep in mind that this is not about whether you consciously believe these ideas or find them consistent with your own values. Rather, it's about whether these messages play out unconsciously in your life. You might notice how many of these 6 points resonate with your experience. You might even want to count on your fingers as I go along here. Internalized capitalism looks like feeling guilty for resting. Your self-worth is largely based on doing well in your career, placing productivity before health, believing that hard work equals happiness, feeling lazy if you rest, even when you're experiencing pain, trauma, or adversity, and using busyness as a way to avoid your needs. Now, if you like, you might turn to a neighbor or post in the chat and briefly share just how many of these 6 you ticked off as applicable to yourself, or you can just take some deep breaths with me. When Kathy Parker encountered this list, she suddenly saw with clarity how these ideas, taken deep into her being, had led her to a state of continual physical and mental exhaustion. "I haven't let myself rest," she says, "because I've been so afraid of the shame attached to labels like lazy or good for nothing. But I'm learning," Parker writes. "I am worthy, no matter what gets done or what doesn't get done." She invites others to join her in questioning these beliefs. What might result? Liberation from the roots of capitalism entrenched in our society, she says, so we may create space for rest, peace, joy, and stillness. Yes, rest is a radical act of self-love and social transformation. Rest is also a religious value. In the biblical tradition, the 7th day is a day of rest. It's right there in the creation story of Genesis. God rested on the 7th day, and we should too. Keeping the Sabbath holy means ceasing to work. In the Christian Testament, Jesus models this rhythm of working and resting too. He teaches, he heals, And then he goes off to the mountain or to the desert, some quiet place to rest in solitude and pray and restore his being. The Gospel of Mark depicts Jesus coaching his disciples to do this too. First, he sends them out among the people, and then when they return to him and share of their work, Jesus said to them, "Come away to a deserted place all by yourselves and rest a while." And so they do. For Unitarian Universalists, the imperative to rest is right there in the first principle that we covenant to affirm and promote, the inherent worth and dignity of every person. We don't have to earn the right to rest. We are inherently worthy. All people are inherently deserving of plenty of rest, relaxation, and recreation. The mission of this particular congregation reinforces rest too. We aim to foster the whole person, compassion and justice. Persons cannot be whole without rest. We cannot practice compassion with others or ourselves if we are empty and exhausted. And there can be no justice without the meeting of the basic needs of all people. Rest is a basic need. Spirituality is about being human beings, not human doings. Creatures with the spark of the divine in our innermost selves. So, of course, traditions like ours encourage us to care for ourselves and to rest. And yet, how well do we live that out? Overwork is built into the larger culture. Many, perhaps most of us, are in the grip of internalized capitalism. I feel it every day. And so perhaps it is not surprising that even here at church, where it is contrary to our values and purpose, overwork is very common. This pandemic period has made that perhaps more visible. Some church volunteers have had more stresses and pressures in their lives and more easily burned out. We almost lost a beloved longtime staff member to burnout last fall, and just said farewell to another staffer who was overloaded in her 2 jobs combined and couldn't sustain her part-time job with the church. Now, even before the pandemic, there was a pattern of overwork among our staff and a revolving door of lay leaders who gave until they gave out, and sometimes then faded away from church life. In a piece published in The Guardian just this past week, journalist Alvin Chang observes that the pandemic has changed American workers, but not the underlying values of their employers. Epidemics and pandemics predictably alter not only our patterns of living, but also the ways people think about their lives. One Yale historian is quoted from 2020 sharing that epidemic diseases pose ultimate questions about mortality. What is life for? What is our relationship with God? Chang reports that companies expect hustle culture and productivity, even if work from home and hybrid models of work are here to stay. And even though Americans are already working longer hours than people in other developed nations. Despite a rise in labor strikes the past couple of years, a record number of employees quitting jobs, and a tough labor market for companies currently, those on the hiring side are still focused on maximizing work output. In contrast, many workers are processing the trauma, stress, and grief of this time, changing their capacities and their needs. They are less willing to be a cog in the work-obsessed culture than they were before COVID. Some workers want more meaning from their work. Others are happy to limit the meaning of their work to a paycheck and limit how much work intrudes on their lives so they can enjoy their free time. Still others now place a higher priority on self-care and care of their loved ones. Many who have been serving in helping professions and public-facing jobs are already burned out and not willing or able to further sacrifice themselves, no matter how meaningful their work once was to them. And the Great Resignation has included people in all sectors, including, by the way, a startling number of ministers and religious educators. So it seems that many workers are ready to shake off internalized capitalism. But employers are in denial. Plus, the historian of pandemics, Frank Snowden, points out workplaces and society at large are totally unprepared for the mental health crisis that will follow in the wake of this pandemic, as has happened after other pandemics. A mental health crisis that does require care and rest. Rest can no longer be optional. Rest can no longer be treated as a four-letter word. We have to change the DNA of American culture. Let's take a musical pause. So, Americans are the hardest working and most poorly treated among so-called developed nations. Why? The Protestant work ethic elevated productivity to a religious value regarding idleness as dangerous or deficient. The founding of this country was deeply shaped by the values specifically of the Puritans, a people understood by social scientists to have had a marriage of convenience with industrial capitalism, which saturated people's minds with the equation, time equals money. This might partially explain why the US has a particularly extreme strain of capitalism, one with a minuscule percentage of workers belonging to unions, one tied for second to last place with Malaysia for how feebly it regulates temporary work arrangements, one that has virtually no protections for workers against being fired, ranking dead last out of 71 nations. There's an evocative phrase for the economic form practiced in our nation, low road capitalism, as sociologist Joel Rogershas calls it. In a capitalist society that goes low, wages are depressed as businesses compete over the price, not the quality of goods. So-called unskilled workers are typically incentivized through punishments, not promotions. Inequality reigns and poverty spreads. In the United States, a larger share of working-age people, 18 to 65, live in poverty than in any other nation belonging to the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD. More poverty here than any other nation. I'm quoting from a 2019 New York Times article by Matthew Desmond that delves into the origins of our economic system. The title of the article says much. In order to understand the brutality of American capitalism, you have to start on the plantation. So you can add that to the list of things my teacher never taught me. Our severe form of economic life and values has its roots in slavery. Desmond writes of our founding, given the choice between modernity and barbarism, prosperity and poverty, lawfulness and cruelty, democracy and totalitarianism, America chose all of the above. Consider the startling fact that the practice of chattel slavery in this country ended just 159 years ago. That's only 2 times the average American lifespan. A mere 2 generations since the U.S. gave up the brutal institution that transformed this nascent, hard-scrabble country into an economic powerhouse. Is it any wonder that the influence of slavery is still felt? Not only by Black Americans, but by all who must participate in an economy that took slavery as its first model of labor. If this sounds like hyperbole, let me illustrate selectively from Desmond's in-depth article. He writes that many of the management techniques that we now take for granted were developed by and for large plantations. This includes complex vertical reporting and accounting structures, careful tracking, recording, and analysis of productivity at the level of the individual worker, double entry record keeping, and precise quantification of materials and labor, which, among other things, helped ensure that items were not disappearing that could be used as weapons in a slave rebellion. A uniform layout of workers on the land to support close monitoring, bodies and tasks aligned with rigorous exactitude. Evaluation of capital assets and depreciation of assets, including the slaves, based on their age and health. Expense and revenue sheets, as well as a full accounting manual that was cutting edge for its time. The plantation was a productivity machine, and through rational, carefully calibrated violence, it managed to increase the productivity of enslaved Black people by leaps and bounds. In the 60 years leading up to the Civil War, the average field slave increased cotton picked by 400%. Desmond reports, the cotton plantation was America's first big business. And behind every cold calculation, every rational fine-tuning of the system, violence lurked. Historian Edward Baptist observed before the Civil War that Americans lived in an economy whose bottom gear was torture. Like today's titans of industry, Desmond writes, planters understood that their profits climbed when they extracted maximum effort out of each worker. Now, managers no longer wield whips, of course. They do still surveil their workforce, often invisibly now with technology, and they are still laser-focused on productivity. Now, don't misunderstand me. I'd much rather be a cubicle dweller earning low wages than a field slave. Anyone would. These are obviously not equivalent situations, but one is deeply influenced by the other. The existence of so horrendous a social stratum as chattel slaves made all other social positions look palatable by comparison. Desmond explains, witnessing the horrors of slavery drilled into poor white workers that things could be worse. American freedom became broadly defined as the opposite of bondage, a malnourished and mean kind of freedom that kept you out of chains but did not provide bread or shelter. Let's pause once more. These systems of oppression cost all Americans much to this day. Not that the burdens of our low-road form of capitalism are evenly distributed. Part of the legacy of our history is that Black folks still have to work harder and suffer more to make ends meet, and may ironically still be painted as lazy freeloaders anyway. Perhaps it should come as no surprise that the rest revolution that is brewing is being led by marginalized people. Take Tricia Hersey, the Black woman who founded the NAP Ministry. Her NAP Ministry website explains, "We believe rest is a form of resistance and names sleep deprivation as a racial and social justice issue." Yes, rest is a radical act of self-love and social transformation. I love the NAP Ministry. Hersey wants to make sure readers know that this is not a tongue-in-cheek humorous project. She writes, "My rest as a Black woman in America suffering from generational exhaustion and racial trauma always was a political refusal and social justice uprising within my body. I took to rest and naps and slowing down as a way to save my life. Resist the systems telling me to do more, and most importantly, as a remembrance to my ancestors who had their dream space stolen from them." Just allergies. She goes on, "This is about a deep unraveling from white supremacy and capitalism. These two systems are violent and evil. History tells us this, and our present living shows this. Rest pushes back and disrupts a system that views human bodies as a tool for production and labor. It is a counter-narrative. We know that we are not machines," she says. "We are divine." Yes, we are human beings inherently worthy, fully deserving of rest. And rest is not trivial. It improves the quality of our lives. It saves lives, period. Rest is a spiritual practice that meets our needs as human beings and our values as Unitarian Universalists. So what can we do? There are many ways to reclaim rest. I'm going to give you my top 10 list of ways to get more rest yourself and help transform American culture. You want to help give me a drum roll? Way number 1, notice any internalized capitalism you may have. As you become aware, try to embrace rest for yourself. Remind yourself you are inherently worthy and you deserve rest. Number 2, practice good sleep hygiene. If you don't regularly get a good night's sleep with enough hours of rest, you may need to get off the electronics earlier, skip snacks after supper, keep a more consistent sleep schedule, whatever it is that works for you. Number 3, affirm to your friends, loved ones, coworkers that rest is a legitimate and important human right. Back each other up on rest. Number 4, build into your life activities that renew you. This is different things for different people. Time in nature, connection with friends, exercise, beauty, playing with pets, a daily spiritual practice, and yes, take a nap when you need one. I hope that worship and small group connections here in this community will be a part of that renewal for you. Number 5, participate in church in a way that helps this place be a beacon of life-affirming, rest-valuing culture. I want to share a metaphor I love, which puts things in perspective for volunteers and workers in all settings. I learned the same technique as a choral singer that this unknown writer describes. They said, sometimes music requires players or singers to hold a note longer than they physically are able. In those cases, we were taught to mindfully stagger when we took a breath. Everyone got to breathe, and the music stayed strong and vibrant. Let's remember music. Take a breath. The rest of the chorus will sing. Then you rejoin so others can breathe. Together we can sustain a very long, beautiful song. We do need your voice, but you don't have to do it all. I love this reminder of staggered breaths. There's no music without rests, and there's also no mission without rests. If you're a church volunteer and you find yourself needing a break from volunteer work, please take it. When you need, if a particular team is no longer where you are feeling called to serve, please move on to one that is fulfilling to you now. Our church can be part of changing this inhumane culture of overwork and actually nurturing the whole person. Number 6, do the best you can in your workplace to contain overwork. Now, this might be the hardest one. You may be going against the grain of low-road capitalist culture. Look for those ways that you can set healthy limits and choose balance for yourself, even if they start out small. And look for opportunities to shape the culture in your workplace for everyone. Number 7, I want to specifically name, take your full vacation and holidays. Americans aren't very good at this. If you're one of the people who has a hard time using the probably modest time off benefits you were offered, get deliberate about changing that. That's my invitation to you. It may help to get support from a therapist or from your family. It helps me to remember that in France, people get 5 to 7 vacation weeks per year. Standard, 5 to 7 vacation weeks per year, 12 paid holidays, and they take them all without a second thought. Everybody does. We deserve that just as much as the French do, right? The economy won't grind to a halt. Consider whether you need, number 8, a longer period of rest to recover from this difficult past couple of years. With the grief, trauma, burnout, and changes in brain functioning that all of this has brought to many people. Perhaps our example as a church can inspire you. With the support of your board of trustees, our 3 core staff members, our administrator, our religious educator, and me as your minister, will each be taking 1 month of pandemic respite leave this summer. We are exhausted, your staff is exhausted, and we need to renew ourselves following these 2 challenging years so we can return with fresh energy and creativity. We will be practicing that staggering idea and taking turns so there will always be at least one of us on duty over this summer. Do you need something like that? Number 9. Workers can make the most of this moment. Are you in a stronger position with the current job market to negotiate with your supervisor or employer about when and where and how much you work, your job description, time off, or other matters important for life balance? Or do you want to explore other job options that might support you better? And finally, number 10, learn more about our nation's history of capitalism, including its roots in slavery. It can strengthen your commitment to rest as a radical act of self-love and social transformation. We'll include links in the Joys and Concerns e-blast if you want to explore any of those. Rest is holy. Rest is a religious imperative. Rest is a radical act of self-love and social transformation. Dear ones, you deserve rest. You are worthy of experiencing wholeness. I do not want you to ever find yourself crying out, as I once did, "It's never enough." I invite all of us to join this journey together. Welcome to the Rest Revolution. I invite you to join in singing our closing hymn, number 83, Winds Be Still. You can stand, sway, or do whatever feels good to your body. That's in the gray hymnal, 83. may be seated. May you know peace and stillness. May you know holy rest. Let each one of us practice this radical form of self-love. And let us help to transform our society so that the inherent worth of each person is truly honored and all know the liberating balm of rest. Amen, and blessed be.